Troy, yes, I have such a mind. Yet if some other prince would join, more probable would be the strengthened hope of our exploit. Two may together see, one going before another slide danger every way. One spirit upon another works, and takes with firmer stay the benefit of all his powers. For though one knew his course, might he well discourse, yet might he well distrust himself. Might he well this offer which the other might he well yet might he well yet might he well distrust yet might he well distrust himself, which the other might enforce. This offer might enforce. This offer every man assumed. All would with Diomed go. All would with Diomed go. This offer every man assumed. All would with Diomed go. The two Ajaces, Merion and Menelaus too. But Nestor's son, Menelaus too. But Nestor's son enforced it much, and hardy Ithacus, who had to every Ithacus, who had to among, who had to Ithacus, who had this. Ithacus, who had to every venturous deed a mind as venturous, who had to every amongst all these thus spake the king, who had to every Ithacus, who had to every venturous deed, and hardy Ithacus, who had to every venturous deed a mind as venturous. Amongst all these thus as venturous. Amongst all these thus spake the king. Tydides, most beloved, choose thy associate worthily, a man the most approved for use and strength in these extremes. Many thou seest stand forth, but choose not thou by height of place, but by regard of worth. Lest with thy nice respect of right to any man's degree, thou wrongs thy venture. Choosing one wrongs thy venture, choosing one thy venture. Thy venture, choosing thy venture. Wrongs thy venture, choosing one least, choosing one venture. Thy venture with thee. Thou wrongs thy venture, choosing one least fit to join with thee, though perhaps a greater king. Least fit to join with thee. Choosing one least fit to join with thee. This spake he, choosing one least thou wrongs thy venture, choosing one least fit to join with thee, although perhaps a greater king. Spake he, this spake perhaps a greater king. This spake he with suspect that Diomed, for honor's sake, his brother would select. Since thou givest then said Tydides, his brother would select. Then said Tydides, since thou givest my judgment, Then said Tydides, Since thou givest my judgment leave to choose, since thou givest Tydides, since thou givest my judgment leave to choose, how, since said Tydides, since thou givest my judgment leave to choose, how can it so much truth to choose? How truth choose? To choose, how can it so much truth forget Ulysses to refuse? That bears a mind so much exempt and vigorous in the effect of all high labors, all high labors, in the effect of all high labors, and a man palace doth both, and we shall return through, and a man labors, and a man palace doth most respect. We shall return through Ulysses. Doth most respect. We shall return through burning fire, if I with him combine. He sets his strength in so true a course, with counsels so divine. Ulysses, with counsels so divine. Ulysses, loath to be esteemed a lover of his praise, with such exceptions humbled him, as did him higher, humbled him, as exceptions humbled. Tydides, exceptions, with such exceptions humbled him, as did him higher raise, and said, Tydides, praise me not more than free truth will bear, nor yet impair me. They are Greeks, but come, impair me. They are Greeks that give judicial ear. But come, the morning hastes, the stars are forward in their course. 2 parts of the night are past, the third is left. 2 now borrow. 2 parts of the night are past, the third is left to employ our force. Now borrowed they for haste some arms. Bold Thrasymedes Diomed his sword, his own was at the tent. Now borrowed they for haste some arms. Bold Thrasymedes lent adventurous Diomed his sword, his own was in the tent. Diomed his sword, his own was at his tent. His shield and helm, tent. His sword, his own was at his tent. His shield and helm tough and well. His shield and helm, his sword, his own was at his tent. His shield, his sword, his own was at his tent. His shield and helm tough and well tanned, without plume or crest, and called a morion, arch or crest, and called a crest. Or crest, and called a morion. Archers' heads it used to invest. Meriones lent Ithacus his quiver and his bow, his helmet fashioned of a hide, the workman did bestow his bow, his helmet fashioned of a hide. The workman did bestow much labor in it, quilting it a hide. The workman did bestow much labor in it, quilting it with bowstrings, and without the snowy tusks, bowstrings, and with bowstrings. It with bowstrings, and without the bowstrings, and without the snowy tusks of white-mouthed boars. 'Twas white-mouthed boars, mouth white-mouthed boars of white-mouthed boars. Tusks of white-mouthed boars, 'twas armed round about right cunningly, and in the midst an arming cap was placed, that with the fixed ends of the tusks his head might not be raised. This long since by Autolycus was brought from Ilion, when he laid waste Amintor's house, that was Ormenus' son, in Scandia, to Cytherus, surnamed Amphidamus. Tusks his head might not be raised. Long since by Autolycus was brought from Ilion, when he was brought from Ilion. Head might not be raised. This long since by Autolycus was brought from Ilion, when he laid waste in Scandia from Ilion, when he laid waste Amintor's house, that was Ormenus' son, in Scandia to Cythereus. That was Ormenus' son, in Scandia to Cythereus, surnamed Amphidamus. Autolycus did give this. Amphidamus gave he when he feasted. Autolycus did give Amphidamus, surnamed Amphidamus. Autolycus did give this helm. He when he feasted this helm. He when he feasted was by honored Molus gave it him. By honored Molus gave it him, as was by honored Molus gave it him, as present of a guest. Molus to his son Merion did make it his bequest. With this Ulysses armed his head, and thus they both addressed took leave of all the other kings, to them a glad ostent as they were with this Ulysses, and thus they both addressed with this Ulysses armed his head, did make it his bequest. With this Ulysses armed his head. And thus they both addressed took leave of all the other kings, and did make it his bequest. With this Ulysses armed his head. And thus they both addressed took leave of all the other kings, both addressed, and thus they both addressed took his head. And thus they both addressed armed his head. And thus they both addressed took leave of all the other kings. To them a glad ostent as they were entering on their way Minerva did present, a hernshaw consecrate to her, which they to her, which they could ill discern through sable night, but by her clang they knew it was a hern. And thus invoked, hear me, Ulysses joyed, and thus invoked, it was a hern. Ulysses joyed, and thus invoked, hear me, great seed of Jove, that ever dost my labors grace with presence of thy love, and all my motions dost attend. Still love me, sacred dame, especially in this exploit, and so protect our fame. We both may safely make retreat, and protect our fame. We both may safely make retreat, and thriftily employ our boldness in some great affair. Vouchsafe me likewise equal to them of Troy. Thriftily employ our boldness in some great affair, baneful to them of Troy. Then prayed baneful to them of Troy. Then prayed illustrate Diomed, vouchsafe me likewise ear, O thou, vouchsafe me, illustrate Diomed, vouchsafe me likewise ear, O thou unconquered queen of arms, be with thy favors near, as to my royal father's steps thou wentst a bounteous, my father's steps thou royal father's steps, thou wentst a bounteous guide, when the archives and the peers of Thebes, and left them at the whose retreat guide, when the archives and the peers of Thebes he would have pacified, sent as the Greeks' ambassador, and left them at the flood of great Aesopus, and left them at the flood of and left them at the flood of great Aesopus, whose retreat thou madest to swim in blood, whose retreat thou madest to swim in blood of his ambushed enemies. And if enemies, and if thou so protect my bold endeavors, to thy name an heifer most select, that never yet was tamed with yoke, broad-fronted, 1 year old, I'll burn in zealous sacrifice herd, and set the horns in gold. The goddess heard, and both the kings their dreadless passage bore, through slaughtered carcasses, arms, and discolored gore. Nor Hector, colored gore, Trojans, and but all to counsel and asked, called arms and discolored gore. Nor Hector let his princes sleep, but all to council called, and asked, what one is here will vow, and keep it unappalled, to have a gift fit for his deed, a chariot and 2 horse that pass for speed the rest of Greece. What one dares take this course for his renown, what one dares take for his renown, what one speed the rest of Greece. What one dares take this course, for his renown besides his gifts, to mix amongst the foe, and learn if to mix amongst the foe, and to mix amongst the foe, and learn if still mix amongst the foe, and learn if still they hold their guards, or with this overthrow determine flight, as being too weak to hold us, as silence stood. Us, as being too, as being, as being, as being too weak to hold us. Our war, with this overthrow determine flight, as being too weak to hold us longer war. All silent to hold us longer war. All silent stood. At last stood forth one Dolon that did care this dangerous work, Eumedes' heir, a herald much renowned. This Dolon did in gold and brass, this Dolon did in gold and brass, much renowned. This Dolon did in gold and brass exceedingly abound, but in his form was exceedingly abound, but in his form was quite deformed, yet passing swift to run. Amongst 5 sisters he was left Eumedes' only son, and he told Hector his free heart, and he told Hector only son, and he told Hector his free heart would undertake to explore the Greeks' intentions. Thou shalt be would undertake to explore the Greeks' intentions. But, said he, told Hector his free heart would undertake to explore the Greeks' intentions. But, said he, thou shalt be sworn before by this thy scepter, by this thy scepter, that the horse of great Aeacides and his was left Eumedes' only son, the Greeks' intentions. But, said he, the Greeks' intentions. But, said he, thou shalt be sworn before by this thy scepter, that the horse of great Aeacides and his strong chariot bound with brass, thou wilt before all these resign me as my resign for all these resign me as my valor's prize. And so I rest unmoved to be thy spy, and not return before I have approved and not return by venturing to Atrides. Be thy spy, and not return before I have approved by venturing to Atrides' ships, where their consults by venturing to Atrides' ship, where their consults Atrides' ship, where their consults are held, if Atrides' ship, where their consults are held, if they resolve still to resist, or fly as quite expelled. He put the scepter, or fly as quite expelled. He put the scepter in his hand, and called the thunder's god, Saturnia's husband, to his oath. Those horse should not be rode by any other man than he, but he forever joy to his renown their services for his good done to Troy. Services for his good done to Troy. His good done to Troy. Done to Troy. Thus swore he, and and forswore himself. Done to Troy. Thus swore he, and forswore himself, forswore himself, yet made base Dolon bold. For himself, yet made base Dolon bold, who on his shoulders hung his bow, and did about him fold a white wolf's hide, and with a helm of weasel skins did arm him, with a helm of then took his white wolf's hide, and with a helm of weasel skins did arm his weasel's head. Then weasel's head. His weasel's head. Then took his dart, and never turned to harm the Greeks with their related drifts. But being past the troops of horse and foot, he promptly runs, and as he runs he stoops to undermine Achilles' horse. Achilles' horse. Undermine Achilles' horse. Ulysses straight did see, and said to Diomed, "This man makes footing towards thee out of the tents. I know not well, but if he used to... But I know not well if he be used as spy, not well, but I know not well if he be used as spy, bent to our fleet, or come to rob, to our fleet, or come to rob the slaughtered enemy, but let us suffer him to come a little further on, and then pursue him. If it chance, if we be overgone, if it chance, and then pursue him. If it chance that we be overgone by his mere swiftness, if we be overgone